There is this fundamental paradox in modern engineering and construction.
Oh, absolutely.
Like we spend years, sometimes decades, designing a massive project. We model it in 3D, we calculate load bearings down to the exact decimal point, and lawyers argue over the contract until every single comma is perfect. We try to freeze the future into this static document.
Right. And then the excavators actually hit the dirt.
Exactly. And suddenly, the ground isn't at all what the geological report said it was.
Yeah, or the government changes a tariff on steel 3,000 miles away.
Right. Or quite simply, the client looks at the plans and says, you know what? I don't want a parking lot there anymore. I want a helipad.
Which happens. The only constant in construction really is change. And frankly, if you don't have a system to handle that change, you don't have a project. You have a disaster waiting to happen.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking today. For everyone joining us on this deep dive, we aren't just talking about change in a vague sense. We are talking about the actual mechanism of change.
The rules of the game.
Yes. We are deep diving into the FIDIC 2017 conditions of contract for EPC turnkey projects.
Which is often called the Silver Book, right?
That's right, the Silver Book.
Specifically, we are looking at Clause 13, variations and adjustments.
And I have to say, this is arguably the most volatile clause in the entire book. It's where that static contract tries to interact with a very messy, dynamic reality.
Because if you get Clause 13 wrong...
You don't just lose money. You lose control of the project scope entirely.
So our mission for this deep dive is to figure out the rules of engagement for you, the listener. When the goalposts move, who pays for it? Who has the power to move them in the first place? And how do we stop the whole legal structure from just collapsing under the weight of a new idea?
It really is a power struggle at its core, between the employer's vision and the contractor's reality on the ground.
I like to think of it this way. Imagine I buy a massive, complicated Lego set from you. Let's say it's a medieval castle.
Okay, I'm building a castle. Right, I pay you, you start building. But halfway through, I send you a letter saying, actually, I've decided I want a space station, but keep the drawbridge.
Which sounds ridiculous, but in the world of large-scale construction, that happens way more often than you'd think.
I bet.
And Clause 13 is what tells us who pays for that space station conversion, how long you have to build it, and whether you, as the builder, can just say, no way, I'm not building a space station.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We've got the employer, that's the person with the money, and the contractor, the one doing the work. Segment 1 here is really about power. Who has the power to change the plan?
Well, under Clause 13.1, which is titled Right to Vary, the power lies overwhelmingly with the employer. The text is quite explicit.
How explicit?
It says variations may be initiated by the employer at any time before the issue of the taking over certificate.
Wait, at any time?
Yeah.
That feels incredibly broad. So the contractor is just working away, 95% done, painting the walls, and the employer can just walk in and say, move this wall 3 meters to the left.
Technically, yes. The clause specifically says the contractor shall be bound by each variation and shall execute the variation.
Wow.
It's not a request, it's an instruction. It's a command. You don't get to say no just because it's inconvenient or because you're tired of the project.
That sounds rough for the contractor. I mean, you've mobilized your team, you've ordered materials, and suddenly the boss says change direction. Is there really no pushback? Is there no way to say, hey, this is unreasonable?
There is a shield, but it's a very specific one. The contractor can't just say, I don't feel like it. But Clause 13.1 gives a list of specific grounds for objection. If the contractor gives a notice promptly, they can object.
Okay, let's go through the texture of these objections, because this seems like where the real arguments happen on site. This is the contractor's defense strategy. What's the first one?
The first one is unforeseeability. That's subparagraph A. If the varied work was unforeseeable, having regard to the scope and nature of the original works.
But unforeseeable is a loaded word. Does that just mean I didn't think of it?
No. In FIDIC terms, it usually means something an experienced contractor could not have reasonably prepared for. But here, it's really about the nature of the work.
Give me an example.
Say you are a civil engineering firm hired to pour concrete and build a bridge, and the variation requires complex chemical engineering or nuclear containment that you simply don't do. You can flag this. It's completely outside your wheelhouse.
Right, like asking for that submarine when I hired you to build the bridge. It's a scope leap, not just scope creep.
Precisely. Then you have the logistical objections. Subparagraph B allows an objection if the contractor cannot readily obtain the goods required.
Oh, this feels very relevant to the current economy. Supply chains are so fragile right now.
Extremely. If the employer asks for a specific type of turbine or a rare marble, and that item has a 50-week lead time or is simply stuck in a port halfway around the world, the contractor can flag that.
Which makes sense.
It prevents the employer from forcing a breach of contract. If I agree to a variation I literally cannot buy the parts for, I'm just setting myself up to fail.
You can't build with what you can't buy. What about safety?
That's a big one. Subparagraph C. If the change will adversely affect health and safety obligations, that's Clause 4.8, or environmental protection under Clause 4.18.
I imagine the pressure from the client to just get it done makes this hard in practice, though.
It does. But if the employer says, I want you to dig this trench right here, and the contractor knows that digging there will destabilize the crane next to it, they absolutely must refuse.
That's a hard stop.
Exactly. It's not just a right, it's an obligation. You cannot follow an instruction that creates a hazard.
Okay, I see there are a couple more here about performance. These seem very specific to the turnkey nature of the contract.
Yes, D&E. These are critical. Remember, in an EPC turnkey project, the contractor isn't just selling bricks and mortar. They are selling a functioning asset. They're promising this power plant will produce 500 megawatts.
Right, so if I mess with the design as the employer, I might break that promise.
Exactly. If the employer says, swap out this expensive pump for a cheaper one, and the contractor knows that the cheaper pump will cause the output to drop to 400 megawatts, they must object.
And if they don't?
If they don't, and they install the cheap pump, and the plant fails the performance test,
The contractor is
a
liable.
contractor is liable. The employer will say, I just asked for a pump. You're the expert. You should told me it wouldn't work.
Wow.
The objection mechanism in 13.1 isn't just a right to say no, it's a duty to warn.
So let's say the contractor raises the shield. They say, we can't do this, it's unsafe, or it breaks the guarantee. Does the employer have to back down?
Not necessarily. The employer receives the notice and then has three choices. Cancel the instruction, confirm it, or vary it.
Wait, if they confirm it, they're basically saying, I hear your objection, do it anyway.
Yes. But, and this is the key takeaway for anyone managing these contracts, if they confirm it over a valid objection, the liability usually shifts. If I tell you, this pump will break the plant, and you sign a paper saying install it anyway, you can't sue me later when the plant breaks. The risk transfer is documented.
It's like a game of liability tennis. You're constantly hitting the ball back into the other court.
That is a perfect description of contract administration.
Okay, so that's the employer enforcing change from the top down. But what if the contractor has a brilliant idea? What if they're on site and realize, hey, we can do this cheaper or faster?
This brings us to Clause 13.2, value engineering. This is the bottom-up approach. It allows the contractor to submit a written proposal to the employer.
I love the term value engineering. It sounds so sophisticated. But often, in my experience, it's code for cutting corners.
It certainly can be. But FIDIC is rigorous here. To qualify, the proposal must achieve one of four things.
Which are?
It has to accelerate completion, reduce costs for the employer, and that includes operating costs, not just building costs, improve efficiency or value, or otherwise benefit the employer.
Operating costs is interesting. So I can propose a more expensive chiller today because it will save you $1 million in electricity over the next 10 years.
Yes. And that is really the holy grail of value engineering. But here's the friction point. The contractor prepares this proposal at their own cost.
So I have to spend my own money, do the engineering, do the pricing, just to figure out how to save you money.
Exactly. And the employer can say no at their sole discretion, so it's a gamble. The contractor invests resources into designing a better solution, hoping the employer accepts it.
So what's in it for the contractor then? If I save the employer $1 million, do I get a cut?
Hopefully. Clause 13.2 mentions that if the proposal is approved, the parties consider sharing the benefit. However, the specific details of that split, who gets what percentage, are detailed in the particular conditions, which is the custom part of the contract.
So the standard text says, we will share. But the fine print defines if that share is 50% or 0%.
Exactly. If you're a contractor, check the fine print. If the split isn't defined or is set to 0, you have absolutely no incentive to innovate. You might as well just build exactly what is on the drawing and go home.
That makes total sense. Let's move on to the actual mechanics. We know who can ask for changes. How do we actually price them and put them into action? Clause 13.3 seems to be the engine room here.
It is, and it outlines two distinct procedures. The first is variation by instruction, that's 13.3.1, and the second is variation by request for proposal, which is 13.3.2.
Okay, let's break those down. Variation by instruction. This is the shoot first, ask questions later method.
In a sense, the employer sends a notice describing the change. The contractor then has 28 days or another agreed period to submit a detailed plan. This plan has to cover everything: the description of work, the schedule modifications, and most importantly, the price tag.
How do they figure out the base, though? Is it just whatever the contractor asks for?
No. There is a hierarchy of valuation. This is where the money is won or lost. First, you look at the schedule of rates and prices in the contract. If there's a rate for that specific item, you use it.
Okay, simple enough. Concrete is $100 a meter. We added 10 meters. That's $1,000.
Right, but what if the variation is for high-strength marine concrete that isn't in the schedule? Then you look for a rate for similar work.
And if it's totally something unique.
Then the contract says a new rate is derived. And if that isn't possible, it goes to cost plus profit.
Cost plus profit. That sounds like the golden ticket for a contractor. Here are my receipts, plus a nice little margin on top.
Contractors generally like cost plus because it lowers their risk, but it changes the relationship from delivered product to audited expense. Employers usually hate it because it removes the incentive for efficiency.
Now, in this section, I saw something about omissions. This is when the employer says, actually don't build that garage.
Yes, but there's a trap here. Can I, as an employer, hire you to build a bridge and then issue a variation omitting the deck, and then hire my cousin to pour the deck for half price?
I feel like the answer is definitely no.
Absolutely not. That is a breach of contract. You cannot omit work for the purpose of giving it to others. The contractor has the right to complete the agreed scope.
But what if I just decide I don't want the deck at all? I just want the pillars, like a monument.
That is a valid omission. But here's the kicker. The contractor might have priced their overheads based on the total value of the job. If you cut 20% of the work, they are technically under-recovering on their fixed costs. So Clause 13.3 allows them to claim for lost profit or damages in that scenario.
So you can't just treat the contractor's scope like a buffet where you put things back on the tray.
Exactly. If they plan to cook it, you pay for the preparation.
Got it. Now, what about the second path? Variation by request for proposal. Clause 13.3.2.
This is the what-if scenario. Before ordering the work, the employer asks, hey, give me a proposal for this change.
This seems a bit more polite.
It's more prudent. The contractor responds with a plan. But here is where it gets really interesting, and this is a surprising fact for many people reading this for the first time.
Hit me.
Suppose the employer asks for a complex proposal. The contractor spends $10,000 on engineering hours just to figure it out. The employer looks at the price and says, too expensive, forget it.
The contractor eats that cost.
No. Under Clause 13.3.2, if the employer requests a proposal and then decides not to proceed, the contractor is entitled to be paid for the cost of preparing that proposal.
Really? So even if the idea is rejected, the effort is billable?
Yes, provided they actually incurred a cost. This prevents the employer from using the contractor as a free estimation service for their brainstorming sessions.
That is a fascinating protection. It puts a price tag on just wondering.
Precisely. It forces the employer to be disciplined. Don't ask for a price unless you're serious about the change.
Moving on to money management. Not every change is a big structural shift. Sometimes you just have a bucket of money for stuff we haven't decided on yet.
You're talking about provisional sums in Clause 13.4.
Yes. It sounds like a temporary bank account.
Think of it as a locked safe in the middle of the site. There is money inside a budgetary placeholder, but the contractor doesn't have the combination. Only the employer can unlock it via an instruction.
So I can't just use the provisional sum because I went over budget on something else?
Never. That money is strictly for parts of the work defined as provisional. Once instructed, it's usually valued at actual cost plus an overhead percentage. It's a very clean way to manage uncertainty.
And then there is the messy way to manage uncertainty. Day work. Clause 13.5. This sounds like it's for the small stuff.
Minor or incidental nature is the phrasing. Clean up that rubble or fix that fence. Things too small to scope out fully.
That sounds simple, but reading the clause, the paperwork sounds intense.
It is highly bureaucratic. To get paid for day work, the contractor must deliver accurate statements every single day to the employer. They need to list the resources, the hours, the materials.
Every day.
Every day. And one copy has to be signed by the employer and returned. If you don't do the daily paperwork, you might not get paid. It prevents the end-of-month surprise, where a contractor claims they had 10 guys working on a fence for 3 weeks.
It's a discipline test. If you want the easy time and materials money, you have to do the hard paperwork.
Correct. If you fail at the discipline, you lose the revenue.
We're coming into the final stretch here, looking at external forces, things outside the control of the employer or the contractor. Clause 13.6 deals with changes in laws.
This is vital for long-term projects. A project might take 5 years. In that time, governments change, safety standards change, tax codes change.
So if the government increases the minimum wage in year 3 and my labor costs skyrocket, do I eat that loss?
Not under FIDIC Act 2017. Clause 13.6 says that if a change in law after the base date causes the contractor to incur cost, they are entitled to that difference.
Now, the base date is usually 28 days before the tender submission, right?
Correct. It draws a line in the sand. Anything the government does after that line is not the contractor's risk.
But notice the balance here. The source text makes an impartial note. Does it work both ways?
It does. If the government repeals a tax on steel or lowers a tariff, the employer is entitled to a reduction in the contract price. The goal is neutrality. The contractor shouldn't profit from a law change, nor should they suffer from one.
And finally, we have clause 13.7, adjustments for changes in cost. This is basically inflation, right?
Yes, cost indexation. Labor gets more expensive, fuel goes up. If the contract includes a schedule of cost indexation, the payments are adjusted based on a formula.
Which seems standard. Prices go up, payments go up.
Standard, except for the double jeopardy provision regarding delay. This is something every project manager needs to know.
Let's walk through that. What is the gotcha clause?
Imagine the project is supposed to finish in January. The contractor is late. It's now July. Between January and July, inflation skyrockets. Materials are now 20% more expensive.
So the contractor is buying materials in July at the higher price. Do they get that extra 20% adjustment?
No. Clause 13.7 says that if the contractor fails to complete on time, the adjustment is calculated using either the index 49 days before the original deadline or the current index, whichever is more favorable to the employer.
Ouch. So the employer effectively says, if you had finished on time, you would have paid the January price. So I'm paying you based on the January index.
Exactly. The contractor pays the actual July price, but gets paid the January adjustment. They eat the inflation.
That effectively freezes the contractor in time. It's a powerful financial penalty for being late.
It prevents a perverse incentive. You shouldn't benefit from inflation during a delay you caused.
We've unpacked a massive amount here. We've gone from the employer's God clause power to vary, to the contractor's shield of safety and impossibility. We've looked at the price of pitching ideas, the bureaucracy of day work, and the trap of inflation.
If I can summarize Clause 13 in one thought, it is the gearbox of the contract.
The gearbox.
Yes, the engine is the scope of work. But the terrain changes hills, mud, speed limits. Clause 13 allows the gears to shift so the engine doesn't stall or explode. It acknowledges that the plan will be wrong and provides a structured way to be right.
It balances flexibility with certainty. The employer gets flexibility to change. The contractor gets certainty on how they'll be paid for it.
And both sides have clear rules on how to behave when those changes happen.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought on that paid-to-pitch clause 13.3.2. We mentioned how unique it is that a contractor gets paid for a proposal, even if it's rejected.
The no free consulting rule.
Think about how that changes behavior. It forces the employer to value the effort of planning, not just the execution. Imagine if we applied that logic elsewhere to consulting, to creative agencies pitching for business, or even to software development. How much waste would we eliminate if we had to pay people for the time they spent proposing solutions we ultimately didn't use?
We would probably be a lot more careful about what we asked for. We'd stop asking what if unless we really meant it.
We certainly would. Clarity has a price, but under FIDIC, confusion costs even more.
Well said.
Thanks for diving deep with us today into the technical, high-stakes world of Clause 13.
A pleasure to be here.
Check your particular conditions, watch your base dates, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.
If you're interested in the templates, please visit our shop. The link is in the description.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and see next time.